Nalin grew up in a quiet Apache settlement, surrounded by tall cedar trees, warm red hills, and a wide desert sky that changed colors throughout the day. People in her tribe often said she had a calm spirit, a spirit that listened more than it spoke. She moved with a soft grace, her steps light on the earth, as if she respected every piece of land she walked on. From an early age, she learned the skills that were important to her people, gathering roots, preparing herbs, weaving mats, and reading small signs in nature that others sometimes missed. She had a deep love for her home and for the traditions that shaped her life. But even with all of that, Nalin sometimes felt a quiet curiosity inside her, a spark that made her wonder about the world beyond the familiar hills. She did not desire to leave her people, but she often thought about what lay behind the far mountains, or who lived in the valleys where the sun set each evening. Her grandmother used to tell her that curiosity was a gift as long as it was guided by respect. So, Nalin kept her curiosity tucked safely inside, like a secret she carried only for herself. Thomas Avery entered the story many miles away, long before Nalin ever saw him. He was a scout, working with groups of settlers who traveled across the frontier. His job was to understand the land where water flowed, where safe paths could be found, where storms gathered, and how to cross the desert without losing precious time. He was known for being calm under pressure, thoughtful, and surprisingly gentle for someone who lived such a rough life outdoors. Thomas often preferred the company of open land over that of noisy towns. He respected nature deeply and tried, in his own quiet ways, to learn from it. Unlike many settlers of that time, Thomas did not see the Apache or any tribe as strangers or dangers. He simply saw them as people who belonged to the land far more than any newcomer. He admired the knowledge they carried, the way they understood plants, animals, weather, and paths that others could not see. Thomas often told himself that if he were ever lucky enough to learn from someone from their world, he would listen with full attention. Their first meeting was not planned. It happened on a warm afternoon when the wind carried the scent of distant rain, though no clouds could yet be seen. Nalin had wandered a little farther than usual in search of a rare type of herb her grandmother used for soothing fevers. She knew the area well, but she still moved carefully, touching the leaves and listening to the small rustling sounds around her. While she searched, she heard something unusual, a soft thud followed by a quiet sigh. Thomas had been walking nearby, studying the land for his mapping work. His horse had stepped into a shallow hole hidden beneath brush. Stumbling just enough to make Thomas lose his map bag, it fell down a small slope, spilling papers and drawing tools. Thomas muttered under his breath as he climbed down to collect them. When he looked up to make sure no more papers had blown away, he saw Nalin standing a short distance away, watching silently. For a moment, neither of them moved. They simply looked at one another, both startled, but not frightened. Nalin had seen strangers before, but she had never stood so close to one who looked more confused than threatening. Thomas, on the other hand, had never seen an Apache woman this close, and realized at once that she belonged to the land in ways he never could. Thomas slowly lifted his hand in a simple gesture of greeting. He did not try to speak right away. He did not want to frighten her or seem disrespectful. Nalin blinked, studying him with calm eyes, and after a moment she gave a small nod. She did not speak English fluently, and she did not know what he might want, so she remained cautious. But she felt no sense of danger. Instead, she felt curiosity rising quietly inside her. Thomas gently picked up the last of his papers and placed them back into his bag. He pointed to the ground, where the herb she had been searching for grew. Nalin looked at the plant and then back at him, surprised that he had noticed what she was doing. Thomas, seeing her interest, stepped back to give her space, and smiled lightly. Nalin approached the plant, knelt, and gathered a few small leaves with careful hands. When she stood up again, she noticed Thomas watching her with respect, as if the simple act of gathering herbs was something meaningful. Though Nalin did not speak much English, She wanted to show gratitude for his kindness and awareness. She placed her hand gently over her heart, a gesture of thanks in her culture. Thomas understood her meaning even without words. Their first meeting ended just as quietly as it had begun. Nalin walked one way, Thomas the other. But both glanced back once, as if checking to see if the moment had been real. Neither of them expected to see each other again, yet something in the gentle encounter stayed with them. Nalin thought about the way Thomas had stepped back to give her room, the way he had noticed the herb, the way he had shown no sign of fear or disrespect. Thomas thought about her calm presence, the careful way she touched the earth, and the quiet intelligence in her eyes. Days passed, and life returned to normal for each of them. But the land had its own plans. Their paths crossed again near a shallow stream, where Nalin often collected water. Thomas had been studying the area for his maps and paused near a tree to rest. When Nalin approached with her clay water pot, she recognized him immediately. This time, she did not freeze. Instead, she approached slowly, with polite caution. Thomas stood up, dusted off his clothes, and moved aside so she could reach the water. He noticed that her pot had a small crack near the top. Wanting to help, but unsure how to communicate without overstepping, he took out a piece of cloth from his bag and tore a small strip from it. He pointed to the crack and offered the cloth as a temporary patch. Nalin hesitated, unsure if she should accept something from him, but his expression showed only sincerity, so she took the cloth, wrapped it gently around the crack, and smiled in quiet appreciation. Since they could not speak many words to each other, they communicated through gestures, expressions, and small movements. Nalin pointed to the sky to warn him of upcoming rain. Thomas responded by pointing to a safer direction to walk if the weather changed quickly. They shared awareness of the land, even though they came from different worlds. Over the next few weeks, their meetings happened more often, not because they planned them, but because both of them seemed to drift toward the same spaces, streams, small clearings, patches of shade where the heat softened. They spoke with simple words when they could, but most of their connection grew in the silence between them. They learned to understand each other by noticing the small things, a head tilt, a quiet breath, the way their footsteps slowed when they saw one another. Nalin found herself thinking about him even when she was busy with chores. She wondered how someone from such a different life could show such gentle awareness. Thomas, in turn, began sketching the hills and valleys with more care, thinking of how Nalin looked at the same landscape with a deeper understanding. Their bond grew without effort, like a plant that finds sunlight on its own. Neither of them planned it. Neither of them sought it out. But something peaceful and natural began forming between them. It was not dramatic or rushed. It was quiet, steady, built on small moments that felt meaningful, even though they were simple. But even as their bond grew, the world around them remained the same, full of boundaries, habits, expectations, and watchful eyes. Nalin knew her people would not understand why she felt drawn to a man from outside their tribe. Thomas knew that his own group would question his interest in someone from a community they barely understood. Yet neither of them let these worries interrupt the calm, steady connection that continued to grow between them. Their story was only beginning, and though neither of them knew it, the moments they shared under the open sky were guiding them slowly toward a path that would challenge everything they had ever known. Nalin's days continued in their usual rhythm, but her heart carried a new warmth she had never felt before. She still woke early to help her grandmother with herbs, still collected water, still prepared meals with the other women of the tribe, but every now and then her thoughts slipped quietly toward Thomas. She never spoke of him because she knew the people around her would not understand. Yet the peaceful moments they shared stayed alive in her memory like small lanterns that glowed whenever she felt tired or overwhelmed. Her grandmother sensed a change in her, though she did not press for answers. She simply watched Nalin with soft eyes, noticing the way she moved with new lightness, the way she smiled to herself sometimes as she worked. In the evenings, while the fire crackled softly and the sky filled with stars, The older woman would weave and hum old songs. Nalin would sit beside her, pretending to focus only on the weaving. But her thoughts often floated elsewhere. The tribe lived closely together, and nothing remained unnoticed for long. A few of the younger girls observed that Nalin sometimes returned from her walks with a faint glow on her face. One of the boys saw her standing by the stream looking thoughtful, as if speaking to someone before he arrived. These observations were small, innocent, and incomplete, but they began to circle quietly among the people, like a breeze that hints at a coming change. One morning, when the sun was still soft and golden, Nalin went to gather berries near the edge of the hills. She did not expect to see Thomas there. Yet when she reached a cluster of low bushes, she heard a familiar soft sound. His footsteps, steady and calm. She turned, and he appeared from between the trees, carrying his map bag slung across his shoulder. His face brightened slightly when he saw her, and hers did too. They greeted each other with quiet smiles. They still did not share many words, but their presence alone felt meaningful. Thomas helped her reach berries on higher branches, and Nalin showed him how to recognize which ones were ripe. They worked peacefully side by side. At one point, Thomas pointed to a small path leading deeper into the hills. With careful gestures, he asked if it was safe to follow. Nalin shook her head gently, explaining through signs that the path was not stable after earlier rainfall. Thomas nodded with gratitude. They spent some time together there, not long, yet long enough for Nalin to forget the world beyond those trees. When she eventually turned back toward her village with her basket of berries, Thomas watched her walk away, quietly grateful for every shared moment. But they did not realize that someone else had seen them. A young hunter from Nalin's tribe had been searching for tracks nearby. When he spotted her speaking with a man from outside the tribe, he froze behind a group of rocks. He watched long enough to understand that this was not the first time they had met. Though nothing unkind or disrespectful happened between them, he returned to the village with worry in his heart. In his eyes, any connection with outsiders, no matter how gentle, could bring misunderstandings or trouble to the tribe. By the time Nalin came home that day, several elders had already gathered near the largest lodge. People whispered quietly among themselves, their faces filled with uncertainty rather than anger. Nalin felt a flutter in her chest when she noticed the unusual stillness. Children stopped playing. Women paused their tasks. Men stood with thoughtful expressions, some with concern, some with confusion. Her grandmother met her at the entrance of their home, her face calm but serious. She touched Nalin's arm gently, a silent signal that something important was about to happen. Nalin followed her toward the gathering place, her basket of berries still in her hands. The eldest member of the tribe stepped forward, his expression gentle but firm. He asked Nalin to sit among the circle. She obeyed quietly, her hands resting on her lap. The hunter who had seen her in the hills stood off to the side, looking uneasy. He clearly did not want to hurt Nalin, but he believed it was his duty to speak. With respectful words, he explained what he had witnessed. He described seeing Nalin with the outsider, how they stood together, how they seemed comfortable with each other. He did not exaggerate or accuse her harshly. His voice carried honest concern about the tribe's safety. Some nodded, understanding his worry. Others exchanged uncertain looks, unsure of how to interpret the situation. Nalin listened quietly. She kept her eyes lowered, not out of shame, but out of deep thought. She had known this moment could come someday, though she had hoped it would not be so soon. When the elder turned to her and asked softly if she wished to explain, Nalin lifted her head. With simple words and a steady voice, she spoke. She said the man she met was respectful and kind. She said he never caused harm, never crossed boundaries, and never acted in a manner that would bring trouble to the tribe. She admitted she had met him more than once, but always in calm, quiet moments filled with understanding, not danger. The elders listened carefully. They saw sincerity in her face, yet their hearts felt heavy. Their worry did not come from judging her character. They trusted Nalan deeply. Their concern came from the long history of misunderstandings between tribes and newcomers. They had lived through seasons where peaceful intentions got lost between languages, where small mistakes grew into large disagreements. They did not want Nalan to be caught in a situation where one wrong word or gesture could bring trouble to her or to the tribe. Even though Thomas had shown no harm, the elders could not base decisions solely on hope. Their responsibility was to protect everyone, and Nalan, in their eyes, had stepped into a place filled with uncertainty. The council discussed for a long time. Some believed that Nalan should simply be warned. Others feared that if the connection continued, it might lead to complications no one could predict. People spoke softly, respectfully, each voice carrying concern rather than anger. When they finally reached a decision, they did not raise their voices or show harshness. The elder turned to Nalan with a compassionate but solemn expression. He told her that her meetings with the outsider had caused the tribe to worry deeply. He explained that their traditions existed to prevent misunderstandings, to keep everyone safe, and to ensure harmony within the community. He said they could not allow her to continue seeing the man, at least not until they understood more about him and his intentions. They asked Nalan to remain within a certain area of the village for some time. They wanted to observe, to make sure no outsider approached without permission. Their request was meant to protect, not punish. Yet it still felt heavy on Nalan's heart. She accepted their decision quietly, knowing that arguing would only create more concern. Yet a deep sadness settled inside her. She knew Thomas would not understand why she suddenly stopped coming to the places where they used to meet. She knew he would wait for her, perhaps worry, perhaps search for her. The thought pained her more than the restrictions placed on her. Her grandmother held her hand softly as they walked back to their home. Once inside, the older woman sat with her for a long time, speaking gently about trust, patience, and the delicate balance of the world they lived in. Nalan listened, absorbing every word, but her heart still felt heavy. In the days that followed, she remained close to the village as requested. She helped with chores, kept busy, and tried to remain calm. But whenever she passed the edge of the settlement, she felt the pull of the quiet stream, the berry bushes, the open hills, the places where she and Thomas had once shared peaceful moments. She wondered if he still walked those paths. She wondered if he was searching for her, confused by her sudden absence. Meanwhile, far beyond the village, Thomas did walk those paths. Each day he returned to the stream, the hills, the shade of the cedar trees. He waited, hoping to see Nalan stepping softly through the brush as she always did. But each day passed quietly, and she never appeared. The distance between them grew not because of unkindness, but because of fear and misunderstanding things neither of them had caused. Yet both of them would soon feel deeply. Their lives continued on separate paths for the moment, but the quiet connection between them had not disappeared. It waited in the background of their hearts like a soft echo, ready to rise again when the time was right. Days passed slowly for Nalan, each one filled with quiet routines, but also with the sense that something important inside her had been placed on pause. She still helped her grandmother with herbs, still joined the women in preparing meals, still listened to the soft drums at night, but her heart felt heavier. Her mind wandered often, drifting toward memories of peaceful moments she had shared with Thomas, the way he noticed the land, the way he respected her silence, the way he tried to understand her, even without many words. She wondered if he returned to the stream or the berry bushes, waiting for her. She wondered if he was confused, or worried, or simply tired of searching. Though she told herself not to think about what she could not change, the thoughts still found her. Gentle, but persistent. The elders had not been unkind to her. They simply asked her to remain close to the village and avoid wandering into the hills alone. They believed they were protecting her and the tribe. But for someone like Nalin, who had always felt the land like a friend, who walked freely through open spaces, this restriction felt like a quiet cage around her spirit. She obeyed, though the longing to walk to her favorite spots tugged at her softly every day. The people in the village treated her kindly, but some eyes lingered on her longer than before, not with anger, but with questions they did not ask out loud. A few older women whispered worries to each other, not about Nalin herself, but about what her meetings with the outsider might mean for the tribe. The younger children watched her curiously, sensing something had shifted even if they didn't understand what it was. Still, life continued. The sun rose, the fires were lit, and the rhythm of the community moved forward. Meanwhile, Thomas felt the absence of Nalin deeply. He did not know why she had stopped coming to the stream or the berry bushes. He visited the familiar places each day, sometimes waiting for hours. When he found no sign of her, he would walk the paths slowly, hoping to find tracks or any hint that she had been nearby. But the land remained quiet. At night, he rested under the stars, replaying their conversations, the gestures they used, the smiles they exchanged, the quiet understanding that passed between them. He wondered if he had done something wrong. Maybe he had stood too close. Maybe he had unknowingly broken some custom she followed. He wished he could ask her. But he also knew he could not simply walk into her village without causing concern. One afternoon, Thomas visited the stream again. The water was low, reflecting the blue sky in gentle ripples. He crouched beside it and dipped his hand into the cool water, thinking about the day he had watched Nalin fill her clay pot. He remembered how she had wrapped the cracked rim with the strip of cloth he had given her, and how she had smiled softly after doing so. That small smile stayed with him even now, giving him both hope and worry. Thomas tried to continue his mapping work, but his heart wasn't fully in it. Each time he drew a line or marked a path, he found his thoughts drifting toward Nalin. He began to feel that he needed to understand what had happened. He needed to know if she was safe, or if something had prevented her from coming to their usual meeting places. Back in the village, Nalin's grandmother noticed the quiet sadness in her granddaughter's eyes. One evening, while they sat beside the fire weaving together, the older woman placed her hand gently over Nalin's. "You carry many thoughts," she said softly, speaking in their language. Nalin looked down, twisting the edge of the basket she was weaving. "I do not wish to bring trouble," she replied quietly, "but my heart feels unsettled." Her grandmother nodded slowly, as if she understood more than Nalin had said out loud. "When a person meets someone who brings them peace, it is hard to stay far from that feeling," she said kindly. "But sometimes our paths must pause so we can understand them better." Nalin listened, letting the words settle inside her like small stones placed carefully in a basket. She loved her grandmother deeply, and her wisdom often helped her understand her own feelings. But even with those comforting words, the distance between her and Thomas still felt heavy. The days continued to pass, and soon the tribe prepared for a small seasonal gathering, a peaceful event where families shared stories, food, and music. The village filled with warm sounds, laughter, soft singing, and the gentle tapping of drums. Everyone came together to enjoy the moment, but Nalin found herself slipping away from the crowd. She stood at the edge of the gathering area, looking toward the hills that curved gently around their land. She didn't go any farther than the boundary the elders had given her, but she stood there quietly, letting the wind brush against her hair. She wondered what Thomas was doing at that very moment. Maybe he was sitting by the stream. Maybe he was walking through the hills. Maybe he was searching for her again. The thought made her heart tighten softly. One of the younger children, a girl named Asha, noticed Nalin standing alone. She walked up to her and held out a small, woven bracelet she had made. "For you," Asha said, with a proud smile. "You look like you need something happy." Nalin accepted the bracelet with warmth in her heart. She thanked the child and tied it around her wrist. These small moments reminded her that she was not alone, even in her worry. Her people still cared for her, even if they did not fully understand her feelings. That night, Nalin dreamed of walking through the hills with Thomas beside her. In the dream, they did not speak, but their silence felt peaceful. When she woke, she almost wished she could stay inside the dream a little longer. The next morning, something unexpected happened. A traveler from a nearby settlement visited the tribe to trade herbs and cloth. He brought friendly greetings, and the elders welcomed him warmly. But he also brought small pieces of news stories of people he had seen along the paths he traveled. During one of his conversations with a group of villagers, he mentioned a man he had seen walking near the cedar hills day after day, searching the land as if looking for something. Nalin overheard this as she passed by carrying a basket of herbs. The traveler described the man as tall, calm, and respectful in his movements. Nalin's heart skipped quietly. She knew who it was. Though she did not show her reaction outwardly, something inside her stirred something gentle but strong. She felt a soft ache for the confusion Thomas must be feeling. She wished she could explain everything to him, but she also knew she could not break the promise she had given the elders. Later, she sat by the fire again with her grandmother. Her grandmother looked at her with warm eyes and said, "The heart cannot always be quiet, even when we ask it to be." Nalin lowered her gaze. "What should I do?" Her grandmother placed a hand over hers. "Sometimes we must trust the path to open in its own time. When two people are meant to understand each other, life finds a way." The words comforted Nalin, though the longing inside her stayed. Meanwhile, Thomas made a decision. He felt he could not keep waiting without knowing whether Nalin was safe. He did not plan to go into her village, that would be disrespectful. But he decided he would walk closer to the boundary of the Apache land. Not to cross it, but to quietly see if there was any sign of her, or any way to understand what had changed. He felt he had to do something, even if it was only to stand at a distance and hope. And so both Nalin and Thomas found themselves at the edge of two worlds, connected by a quiet bond, separated by misunderstandings, not of their making, and moving slowly toward a moment neither could yet see. Their hearts were carrying the same silent question. Thomas walked with careful steps as he approached the outer edges of the land he knew belonged to Nalin's people. He made sure not to cross into any area that would be seen as disrespectful. His intention was not to cause trouble or fear, only to understand what had happened. The morning air felt cool as it brushed against his face, but his heart was warm with hope and worry mixed together. He stopped at a gentle slope overlooking a wide stretch of land where the hills curved inward, forming a small natural clearing. He had passed this place many times before, either on his way to the stream or while searching for plants to sketch. This time, however, his reasons were different. He sat quietly beneath a tall cedar tree, listening to the wind. Every few moments, he looked toward the paths that led back to the village. He wasn't expecting Nalin to appear immediately, but his heart held a quiet wish. Nalin, on the other hand, began her morning unaware that something important was about to happen. She helped the older women with their tasks, sorted herbs, and assisted her grandmother in preparing a calming tea. Her mind wandered often, drifting to the man she had not seen in days. She wondered if he had given up searching, or if he had understood the silence as a sign to stay away. The thought made her chest tighten softly. When her grandmother noticed the distant look in her eyes, she touched her shoulder gently. "Take a walk near the edge of the village," she said in a soft voice. "Fresh air may help you find clarity." Nalin looked at her grandmother with gratitude. She knew the elder woman understood more than she spoke. With her grandmother's quiet permission, Nalin stepped away from the center of the village and headed toward the boundary she was still allowed to approach. She walked slowly, thinking carefully about every step, not because she feared anything, but because her heart felt both heavy and hopeful at the same time. As she approached the familiar stretch of land, she felt something different in the air. A strange but comforting sense, like someone she knew was standing nearby. She paused, looking around, unsure why her heart suddenly quickened. Thomas stood under the cedar tree, unaware that she had come so close. He thought he was alone. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped loosely as he stared at the hills. He whispered softly to himself, words carried away by the wind. Nalin recognized him instantly. Her breath caught quietly, and her feet froze for a moment. She had imagined seeing him again so many times, but she never thought she would find him sitting there so calmly, waiting not out of impatience, but out of hope. A warmth rose gently inside her chest, replacing the days of uncertainty with something calm and reassuring. She took a step toward him, her footsteps soft but steady. Thomas heard the faint sound of movement behind him. His heart tightened not with fear, but with a deep wish that it might be her. He turned slowly, and when his eyes met hers, he stood up almost immediately, though not in a hurried way. His expression softened with relief, surprise, and gratitude, all at once. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply looked at each other, letting the quiet moment fill in the spaces that words could not reach. Nalin was the first to walk closer. She stood before him, her hands gently clasped together at her waist. Thomas looked at her with deep concern mixed with gentle respect. He gestured slightly, as if asking if she was all right. Nalin nodded, though her eyes revealed the heaviness she had been carrying. Thomas touched his chest lightly and then pointed to her, trying to ask why she had stopped coming to the places where they had once met. Nalin understood. She looked down for a moment, searching for the right simple words. "My people worry," she said quietly. "They want safety. For all of us." Thomas listened carefully. He did not look upset or confused. Instead, he nodded with understanding. He knew that misunderstandings between groups happened often. He knew her people had reasons to be cautious. He respected that. But the worry in his eyes remained not worry about himself, but about her. Nalin lifted her gaze again. "I cannot walk far," she added softly. "Not now." Thomas nodded again, this time more slowly. He understood what she meant, even if she did not explain every detail. He did not ask her to break any rules. He did not ask her to choose between her tribe and him. He simply accepted the reality she carried. To reassure her, he stepped back a little, showing respect for the distance she needed to keep. But his eyes held the same kindness that had made her trust him in the first place. Nalin appreciated his understanding more than she could express in words. A gentle breeze passed between them, carrying the soft scent of cedar. Thomas reached into his bag and pulled out a small folded paper. He hesitated for a moment, then offered it to her with both hands, not as a demand, but as a gesture of care. Nalin unfolded the paper carefully. Inside was a simple drawing, one of the berry bushes, where they had first shared a peaceful moment. The sketch was soft, full of small details she remembered. She looked at the drawing for a long time, touched by the thoughtfulness behind it. "Thank you," she whispered, holding the paper close. Thomas smiled softly. His shoulders relaxed as if a weight had lifted. He then pointed to himself and made a gentle sign near his heart, trying to say that he cared. He added another gesture, one that suggested he wanted peace and understanding, not trouble. Nalin nodded with deep appreciation. She wished she could tell him everything. She felt the confusion, the longing, the hope. But words were not always easy between them. Instead, she placed her hand lightly over the drawing and looked at him with an expression filled with quiet sincerity. They stood there for a long moment, neither needing to speak. But then Nalin glanced back toward the village. She knew she couldn't stay out much longer without questions being raised. She looked at Thomas with soft regret. He understood immediately. He raised one hand slightly, a gesture of farewell for now, not forever. Nalin mirrored the gesture. She stepped back slowly, her eyes never leaving his until distance separated them enough that she had to turn around. She walked calmly toward her village, the drawing held close to her chest. Each step felt both heavy and light-heavy because she had to leave. Light because she had finally seen him again and explained what she could. Thomas remained in the clearing even after she disappeared from view. He sat down again under the cedar tree, his heart feeling more at ease. He knew now that she had not abandoned their friendship. He understood that she was being careful, not distant, and that was enough for him. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of their quiet reunion settle inside him like a gentle ember. Back in the village, Nalin returned to her grandmother, who watched her with knowing eyes. Without asking a single question, her grandmother smiled softly and touched the drawing with gentle fingers. "You found a little peace today," she said quietly. Nalin nodded, her heart lighter than it had been in many days. Though she still faced limits and uncertainties, the connection between her and Thomas had not faded. It remained strong, gentle, respectful, and full of quiet hope. And both of them knew that their story was not finished yet. Thomas carried Nalin through the quiet desert night, holding her as gently as he could. He could feel how tired she was, how light her body felt in his arms. She rested her head on his shoulder, trusting him completely, even though her strength was still weak. The moon was bright above them, guiding their way, as if it understood their struggle. The stars seemed to watch them, shining softly, almost as though they wanted to protect the two souls escaping into the unknown. Thomas walked carefully, trying not to make any sound, because even though the night was calm, he knew it was safest to move with silence and patience. When they reached the hidden canyon Nalin had once told him about, Thomas stopped and looked around. It was peaceful, quiet, and safe. Tall rocks surrounded the small open area like guarding walls, and a stream of clear water flowed nearby. A few green bushes grew around the stream, and there was a small patch of soft earth where they could rest. It felt like a place untouched by conflict, a place where fear had no power. Thomas smiled softly, relieved. He gently laid Nalin down near the water and brushed her hair away from her face. She opened her eyes slowly, and even though she was tired, she gave him a small, grateful smile. Thomas gathered clean water in his hands and brought it to her lips. Nalin drank slowly. The cool water gave her a little energy, enough to speak softly. She told Thomas that she felt safe with him, and Thomas felt a warmth in his chest because that simple trust meant everything to him. He promised her that he would stay with her always, no matter what challenges came their way. Nalin nodded, knowing he meant every word. As the sky began to shift toward dawn, an old Apache elder quietly approached the canyon. He walked with careful steps, showing respect for the peaceful place. His eyes were calm and kind, carrying wisdom that had been shaped by many years and experiences. He had come, not to judge, but to help. The elder had always believed in understanding, and though he did not agree with everything that had happened in the tribe, he stayed loyal to his people while still keeping compassion in his heart. When he saw Nalin resting with Thomas nearby, he did not look angry. Thomas stood up when he noticed him, not knowing what to expect, but the elder raised his hand gently to show he meant no harm. His voice was soft when he spoke. He said that Nalin deserved to live freely, and that kindness was more important than fear. He carried a small pouch with natural medicines made from plants, roots, and herbs. He gave it to Thomas and explained carefully how each one should be used. Thomas listened respectfully, grateful for the elder's guidance. Nalin's eyes filled with emotion when she saw the elder. She sat up a little, and the elder placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. He told her that she had always been strong, and that her courage would help her heal. He also told her that love was not something to punish, because love itself had no intention to harm anyone. Nalin's heart felt lighter hearing his words. The elder stayed with them for a little while, sharing wisdom and offering quiet comfort. Before leaving, he told them that the world was wide enough for them to make a new life, where they could live without fear or judgment. For several days, Thomas stayed in the canyon with Nalin. He made a small shelter from branches and large leaves, creating shade so she could rest comfortably. Each morning he went to gather berries, roots, and clean water. He learned to use the natural medicines the elder had given him, preparing them with patience and care. Nalin slowly grew stronger, her energy returning little by little. She walked to the stream each day, first with Thomas supporting her, then on her own, once she began to recover fully. During those days, they talked about everything: their pasts, their dreams, their worries, and their hopes. They shared stories of their childhoods, stories of the land, and stories of the things that gave them strength. As they spent more time together, their bond grew even deeper. Thomas admired Nalin's quiet bravery, her gentle spirit, and her determination. Nalin admired Thomas's kindness, his honesty, and his willingness to stand by her even when the world seemed against them. One evening, while the sun was setting behind the canyon walls, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and gold, Nalin stood beside Thomas and told him she felt ready to start a new life. Not a life of fear or hiding, but a life of freedom. Thomas took her hand gently, and they both felt that peaceful moment settle deep inside them. It was the beginning of something new, something hopeful. The next morning, they packed the little they had and left the canyon. They walked through the valley side by side, stepping into the open land where no one claimed ownership. The path ahead was long and uncertain, but neither of them felt afraid. They knew they had each other, and that was enough. They traveled slowly, choosing places that felt calm and safe. Sometimes they stayed near gentle rivers, other times under the shade of large oak trees. Everywhere they went, they carried a quiet sense of peace. As weeks passed, they eventually reached the borderlands, distant stretches of land where different communities lived. But none ruled over the whole area. Here, people from many backgrounds crossed paths. Some were traders, some travelers, and some simply people searching for a fresh start. Thomas and Nalin built a small home there, using stones, wood, and clay. It was simple but warm, a place filled with laughter and trust. They grew small gardens, gathered wild fruits, and lived each day at their own gentle pace. People who met them sometimes noticed how deeply they cared for each other. Over time, a quiet story began to spread about a young Apache woman and a kind man who had chosen love over fear. The story traveled far, passed from person to person, but always spoken in soft voices, as though it was a precious reminder that compassion could change even the hardest situations. Nalin and Thomas never looked back with regret. They respected the past, but did not let it control their future. Their days were peaceful, filled with simple joys, morning breezes, warm sunlight, evenings by the fire, and the comfort of knowing they had made the right choice for their hearts. They built a life filled with understanding and patience, proving that love did not need permission to exist. Though the world around them continued to change, one truth remained the same. Thomas never allowed Nalin to face hardship alone. He stood by her, not out of obligation, but because his heart understood hers. Nalin, in return, gave him strength, wisdom, and quiet courage. Together, they created a life that became a gentle legend. A story not of conflict, but of hope. They were two souls who chose kindness over division, trust over fear, and love over anything that tried to separate them. And because of that choice, they lived a life that many people later remembered, not for the struggles they escaped, but for the peace they found together.